as I may have made mention to in one of last week's reviews, or if you just happen to catch a glimpse at our Insta feed. We spent platty-jubes down in Briz, because, let's face it, getting as far away from London was definitely the play. And what's a good trip without bringing back a couple of souvenirs? So today we have one almighty collab, featuring two of Bristol's finest. I'm talking of course of Wiper and True and a little Arbor for this special barrel-aged sour pale, the Dream Work. Taking a mixed culture sour beer brewed by neighbours Arbor, Wiper and True have barrel-aged it for 2 whole years on a whole heap of strawberries, then combining it with beers from their very own barrel-aged reserves, resulting in a pale golden blend and a beautifully sour brew. Expect tart fruits up front, with a sharpness that mellows with a biscuity sweet finish. And with the addition of lactose, that should help add a subtle creaminess and a real weight of body. This right here is from batch number 1, bottled all the way back in August of last year. Their advice to drink fresh or age even more. But this right here is as old as it's gonna get. So let's get a little wild and sour. Let's get pouring. So it does have that wild, yeasty, lambic aroma to it. A real punch of sweet berries and super tartness. You could have picked this up in Bristol or maybe in Belgium. Oh, so it is real lively in carbonation, and that just adds to that tart mouthfeel. It has a real solid sourness to it. But right in behind, you are getting a little feel of that lactose. There is a subtle creamy layer hidden in the back end, which is sandwiching those beautiful bright strawberry notes. But it is still very light and it is very refreshing. And I've got to admit, it isn't overly acidic, which does come as a little bit of a surprise considering how tart it was initially. And as some of that initial tartness is starting to fade, it's being replaced by a really floral, rose petal-like note, which is helping to blend into that sweet strawberry with an almost bubblegum-like note, before some of those fruity acidic notes do start to make that long-awaited appearance down in the tail. And there is a real dry wine or rosé note in that finish. And you are, of course, getting a subtle woody note in there as well. And it's in that finish where the beer is starting to really develop. It is getting drier, and those woody notes, they are getting more dominant. They're now being joined by some almost stone fruit-like notes. And it does leave the tongue coated with a subtle note of lactose and a little bit of acid too. And now we're down into the final third. It really does have the vibe of a classic lambic brew, kicking off being light, refreshing, and oh so tart, with sweet fruits really packing things out. And there is a noticeable creaminess in those middles, no doubt coming from that lactose. But there is that unmistakable sourness to it. But as that initial tartness up top begins to fade, some real floral, even herbal notes start to take its place, led by a real rose petal punch. And those rosy notes do blend beautifully into that strawberry, giving the tongue a tickle of bubblegum. But those sweet notes are not to last, as those pH levels do start to dip, and those more acidic notes start to become ever more present, and it turns the beer into a more wine-like or rosé-like direction, with a real dryness and noticeably woody note in that finish. And it's in the tail end where the beer's final development starts to take root, as notes of stone fruit start to join those woody notes, carrying on some of that early sweetness with an almost marmalade-esque feel. And I've got to admit, lambics were a style that first really introduced me to the whole beer world. But since discovering craft, it's definitely a style I've neglected. So to get my hands on something like this has definitely been a trip down memory lane and a right old blast from the past.